Hello and welcome to today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. I am your host, Kia, and today I am so excited that I get to welcome Natasha Slayton to the show. But before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit more about her. Natasha is a singer and performer, as well as a certified Ayurvedic Wellness Counselor and energy worker with a focus on diet, lifestyle, and Ayurvedic nutrition. She is passionate about reminding people of the totality and truth of who they really are, helping them connect back to that state of being to become the best version of themselves. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Hi, Kia.
Hi. So a couple things that were on my mind, and usually what I love to do is when guests come on the show, I always like to level set with our connection. And for you, this was I don't think it was a coincidence, but it was such like an interesting way that we connected back in 2020, the early part of the pandemic, and you saw one of my infamous check-ins on Instagram, and you reached out to me with such beautiful messages. And I'm wondering, Natasha, if you remember what you were going through at that time that drew you to landing on that check-in that I shared.
Absolutely. Well, I don't know how I found it, but I was so grateful when I did, because you asked like a series of questions that helped me to reconnect back with myself. And I just remember at the time, like you said, it was like in the middle of, the lockdown and the pandemic, and where I personally wasn't taking as good of care of myself as I could have been. I think more so on an emotional scale, because I think like a lot of us was just very overcome with like fear and like not knowing what's going on and not being able to trust in the process, because, the situation was so intense, like all over the world, and we didn't know what was going to happen or what was happening. And so just to be able to have something that felt very grounded to come to and be able to like have a physical list where I could check off and ask myself these questions, like, okay, how am I feeling? How am I doing? If I'm not feeling okay, like, what am I doing to sort of propel me in a different direction? And like, am I taking care of my mind, body, and spirit? Like, it's okay to not be okay. And I don't remember exactly what questions and what bullet points you had on this list, but I just remember that it gave me this very grounded sense of peace, and just knowing that, I could have a support system that's maybe not even someone I know, and also someone else that might be going through something similar, that just was having the quote unquote courage to step into that space of allowing yourself to feel and allowing yourself to be. And as a person that, I really take pride in the way that I do care for myself and the way that I do continuously check in, but it's very easy for me to also disconnect from that and forget. And especially in times of intense emotion and intense situation. So I just felt very grateful.
Thank you for that. I'm so glad that was the entree to us getting to know each other, because it's been like, your heart is so golden. So I'm just so glad that we've connected and continue to get to know each other over these few years.
Thank you.
So Natasha, what's so fascinating to me, and I love the journey that you're on, but what's so interesting to me is, so, you're this singer and performer, you're out there, but you also have started the Heart of Healing podcast, and you're on this really beautiful, marvelous Ayurvedic wellness journey. And I'm curious to hear from you, what was it that caused you to start that shift, to bring that into your life?
Absolutely. Okay. So it's kind of like a series of events, if you will. And my entire life, I've really been very, very invested in holistic medicine, spirituality, just all that entire world, and from a very young age, from like 9 or 10. So I don't know what you believe or what some of the listeners believe, but I feel like it was so strong within me that I brought it in from like a past life, or I'm tapping into like some ancient things that, at that age, I wasn't even understanding, but just felt so drawn to. And so at the same time, I grew up in a household where my dad was a comedian and an actor, and I'm a Leo and an only child. And the dramatics just felt very natural to me and ingrained in me. And I always had this need to like sing and express and perform. And, I grew up acting as well. And so, I never really knew how the worlds would connect. I always felt very much like me. And so all of these parts of me were very true to who I am at the core level, but I never was really able to kind of figure out how to mix them, if you will, not even knowing if I needed to or not, but kind of felt like these were two separate parts of me for a very long time. And then especially, in like the 90s and the early 2000s, when like, if you're a performer, you're a performer. If you're a singer, you're a singer. If you're a dancer, you're a dancer. There seemed to be a lot more rules and rigidity in the system of things, way more than there is now, especially with like the birth of social media and, but yeah, like I never really lost that part of myself. It just was never something that I had really outwardly shared publicly. And then, to be completely honest, during the pandemic, because I'd always seen myself like being this dancer, singer, performer, songwriter, all these things. But then I also saw myself, having a wellness business and opening up a center and, maybe doing a podcast and like sharing some of the wonderful people I've come into contact with and some of the wonderful tools for healing. But again, never really knowing how to put them together. And so during the pandemic, I'd had a reunion with the girls that I'm in a girl group with and have been in a girl group with for some time now. And it's just very honestly, it's very difficult to be in the entertainment industry unless you're like at the very, very top. Sometimes it's hard to get the money going. It's hard to like have all the pieces kind of come together. You really do need a full team of people. Yeah. So during that time, one of our girls had gone away, like back to her hometown for some personal family things. And my dad and my stepmom actually approached me and they were like, we see you trying to do all of these things, but we feel like, maybe it would be beneficial for you to also start incorporating some of the other things that you love, something that could maybe give you a foundation on which to really stand. And that way, you don't have to say goodbye to like singing and dancing and all of that, but because we know you love this as well, like maybe that just makes more sense for now. And at the time, I actually was super sick with COVID. They like decided to have like this sit down FaceTime conversation with me. And I was so emotionally drained and so physically drained that I was like, why now? And like literally in so much despair, I can't even tell you, like I was crying so much. I'm laughing now because it turned out to be such a gift. But so basically, long story kind of short, I ended up going to school for Ayurvedic medicine. It was just something that really called to me. And I didn't actually even know, very ignorantly, what Ayurveda really was. I just thought, okay, this is another holistic sort of path. And being a naturopath takes like a really, really long time, full time. And I can't really commit myself to that exact path right now. So like, let me explore Ayurveda. And what's really magical about Ayurveda is that, and I'm not like closing the doors to any other part of the holistic system because I love all of it. But what's really magical about Ayurveda is they say like, it doesn't come to you by chance. It's never an accident. So the more I started studying it, the more I realized I was actually already incorporating parts of Ayurveda into my life. Like whether you like tongue scrape or start the morning with hot water, or you take ashwagandha or turmeric, like all these things are just little tiny slices of Ayurveda that we're all, kind of familiar with, whether we realize or not. But anyways, I digress. So that's just kind of where like the turning point really started to happen for me and where that major shift started to happen.
Yeah. And when you started making it, so this feels very courageous, right? Because you you talked about being in the entertainment industry and you had this life that's really different from the wellness industry, right? And so as that recommendation was made to you by your dad and your stepmom, and you started, taking these little steps forward, Did you feel scared? Did you feel like, oh my God, what does this mean for this other part of my life? How does that change? Did you feel that fear rising up in you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, this journey has not been without its extreme ups and downs, and like even some at points resentment towards my dad and stepmom, especially at the beginning, because I was like, part of me logically understood all of it. And of course I knew they were coming from a place of love, but I also immediately, my ego's like, you don't believe in me. You don't support what I do. All the things, which is, could not be further from the truth. Excuse me. Couldn't be further from the truth. I'm very lucky for their support in all ways, but and then already feeling like I didn't have enough time to do what I was already trying to accomplish. Right. And so of course, all of those feelings bubble up in me from time to time, definitely way less now, because I feel like I've done a lot of like the inner work and, but also not neglecting those feelings, not stuffing them down. Right. And that's been, it's been a work in progress for sure. But I'm really glad you asked that question, because it's been so prevalent on my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you said an important part, and I know we talked about this on your show, that, the more that we step over and ignore those feelings that are coming up within us, and it's not that we have to spend all the time and feel the feelings all the time, but when those feelings do keep coming up and they're repeatedly coming up, that is, the universe, God, whatever higher power you believe in, is knocking on the door to say, hey, you better do something about this. Like, let's get it together, because if you don't, then, the more you ignore it, the longer you ignore it, that's when you start getting into kind of like the red zone, right? The danger zone.
Absolutely. And it starts to like manifest in your body in a physical form as well, and like take the form of different illnesses. And so, and I'm very emotionally charged person. And so if I'm not careful, I can have extreme highs and extreme lows. Like that's just been the nature of sort of my life, I feel like. So I am almost forced in a good way to have to look at these feelings, because I can't let myself sit with anything that doesn't feel super good for too long. Not that I need to focus on like the positive all the time, but I mean, like, I like to dig up all the dirt and all the roots. Like, I like to get to the nitty gritty, because I kind of won't take no for an answer in terms of like feeling good and creating the best possible outcomes for myself, whether I'm able to predict those or not. God and the universe always has a better plan. I know this, but what I can do, I'm very like hands-on in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And which this is a really great segue into, really the central focus of this show, which is talking about courage and giving ourselves permission to be courageous, which a lot of what you have shared has laddered up to this. And where I'd love to start is to ask you, when you think of or hear the word courage, what does it mean to you? Because I know it means so many different things to so many different people.
Well, to be very, very real, I feel like I am the queen of like over planning, over preparedness, and like honestly, the queen of fear, very ironically. Like my entire life, I was such a chicken to do everything. So building up courage, even as like a performer, like I would go into auditions as a young kid, and my parents eventually took me out of acting until I begged them to get back in. But when I was like 2 or 3, they put me in, they were like, oh, maybe she'll like, like this. And I remember clinging to my mom's legs and like, just not, and I feel like I had that fear with everything growing up, and I literally digressed again. I'm so sorry. But courage to me really feels like a relaxation into the self. Feeling like having the wherewithal to, and the guts to be vulnerable and show up as yourself no matter where you are. So like this idea of courage kind of makes me think of this like strong person standing at the top of a mountain, being able to conquer everything with like ultimate confidence and top skills and everything they do. And I feel like where the courage lies is being able to just show up as your authentic self, speaking your truth and being vulnerable to whatever comes.
I love what you said there. Relax into yourself. And it's so appropriate that you and I are talking because, and not to keep harping on your being in the entertainment industry, but because that is such an industry that is focused on the outside, right? It cares a lot about the outside and how you show up and, just how you are participating in whatever sector of the entertainment industry that you are in. And I'm going to jump ahead because one of the chief fears that I hear from people, there's like 3 or 4 that are most common, but one of them is the fear of putting themselves out there because of how that might mean you're rejected. And so I'm interested to hear from you. You just said, I was the queen of fear going to all these auditions. And so, you've been in the girl group, you've been acting. How do you deal with that fear of being rejected, what people are going to say about you? Because everyone has an opinion, especially on social media. We've got the keyboard warriors that, they probably never would say these things to our faces, but they're so courageous behind their phones and laptops. So Seriously. I'm interested to hear from you because you are in the public eye. How do you deal with that fear of rejection and putting yourself out there?
Well, I feel very lucky, first of all, that growing up in the business, there wasn't social media really. Right. So I feel like I got like the good end of the stick, so to speak, in that way, because I was able to avoid at least some of that to an extent. And even when GRL was popular, a few years back, like Instagram was still newish. So it's like, we did have a lot of cyber bullies, but like, I don't think nearly as much as what a lot of people are experiencing today. But I will say that it's a constant battle. Like, I don't think if I'd had the success that I wanted to have when I was younger, that I would have been able to handle it. And I feel like I'm in a space now. And actually, I mean, I can kind of speak to that too, is because even during the height of GRL, I was drinking and using drugs and doing things that were very outside of the norm of who Natasha is, and something I never thought I'd do, just to anesthetize myself from all of those extra feelings and extra things that I didn't think or didn't know how to handle at the time. So that being said, I think, it's a constant process. It depends on like where I am emotionally. And again, that's why I place so much importance on checking in with myself and on emotional self-care, because if I don't, then it's like, I read a comment or I see something that might be triggering to me. And although I know that's coming from the self, it can like set me so far back, and it can ruin a whole day if I'm not careful. But if I see a comment or I see something that I'm, don't agree with or whatever, then if I'm in a good space, it kind of just rolls off of me. And I'm like, it doesn't affect me in the same way. So perspective is super important. And I'm really glad I have the tools I have now of tapping. EFT is one of my favorite things, because it just interrupts your thought processes, and it helps to rewire the neural pathways in the brain. So it can really help you restructure thoughts and beliefs and perspectives that you feel like are almost not only ingrained and stuck, but maybe hopeless to shift. And so it creates miracles. I swear by it. And then, just quieting the mind, which is easier said than done, but like meditation or getting in nature. And these things really help me to sort of step back from that sort of limited space of thinking and that fear-based thinking. And when I can separate myself from the limited beliefs of other people, because, it only affects me when I'm in my own limiting belief frequency, then that's where, I'm able to step into that higher perspective and have that not affect me. But I'm human. And of course, it's going to affect me.
Yeah. But what you said there, Natasha, is so important though. And I've never heard anyone articulate it like that, about how when you are in your own limited self-view, then that's when it's almost like that opens the door to these other outside influences to have more impact on you. Because you're right, we're all human, right? Like we all want to be accepted and liked. And there are people out there that are going to dislike us for no reason, right? Just because they woke up on the wrong side of the bed, they're like, I'm deciding that I'm not going to like this person. I'm going to critique everything that they say, right? Like we've all been there. But I really, really, really want to amplify what you said of connecting the importance of emotional self-care and checking in with yourself to how those outside influences can impact you at a higher level versus not very much, and being able to let it roll off your back. That's really, really important. So thank you for sharing that perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I kind of feel like I got it as a download from like God or higher self. Because when you said it back to me, I got full body chills. I was like, whoa. But don't you feel like when you aren't checking in with yourself that you're more susceptible to those vulnerabilities?
Oh, yes. So I'm going to, for those of you that are listening on podcasts, I am holding up a little Post-it note that I keep in front, like to the side of my computer, like where I have to look to like grab my drink or my mouse or my phone or something like that, or even open the window. And it is there because that, and in fact, this is one of the things that my therapist and I talk about. I've been vocal about this. I haven't shared all the details, but I've been very vocal about this lately, that this year, 2022, has been probably the worst year for my mental health ever. I've had some really dark moments, and so I had to get into therapy. And the two things, and you touched on the other one, the two things that my therapist is like, you have to do these things. I don't care what you have to do it. You have to do these things. Check in with yourself, like stop that, spiraling, because it's so easy. If you don't check yourself, it is so easy to go from here all the way off the cliff. So that's the one thing. I have to take that time. I call it a meeting with myself. I have to take that time to check in and say, okay, how's it going? How are you feeling? Are you on track? Are you off track? How do you get back on track? What's one thing that you can commit to, right? And I change the questions every day, but I have 2 Post-its right on my little, right by my desk that I can look at quickly to be like, okay, I'm spinning right now. How do I need to check in with myself? The other thing is to step away from my computer and take a break. And usually that break involves getting into nature. For me, as a water sign, I have to be able to go to a large body of water. So I live right by the ocean. So in fact, yesterday, because I could feel myself when I got up, I could feel myself starting to spin out. And so I told my husband, I'm going to go, the little part of our town where you can drive right up to the ocean is called the Cove. And I said, okay, I'm going to the Cove for a little while. And he knows that is like, that's the precursor, that if I don't do that, I'm going to freak all the way out. So I went to the Cove because I could feel myself starting to go to a place. So getting into nature for me and doing those check-ins are the 2 things that I absolutely positively have to do in order to prevent, or as much as possible, at least take the temperature down on how those outside influences, how my circumstances impact me. So thank you for redirecting that question to me.
I love that you shared that. I think it's so important to like bring awareness to, again, checking in with yourself and how important it is. And I love that you said you have a meeting with yourself, because it's like a relationship and it takes maintenance. And if you don't constantly maintain, then you could fall apart. And so it's really important. And I think there's this misconception that someone like you, who just seems so together and is actually helping so many people check in with themselves, it's so important to know that you too have to take care. And it's just a process of an important part of being human that we all need to take part in.
Yes. And I'm not always good at it. There are whole weeks that I will go and not do a check-in. And at the end of the week, I'm like, oh, I know where I went wrong. I know what didn't happen. And that's why I feel like crap.
Such a valuable lesson.
It is. It really is.
It makes you think like, oh, okay, I'm learning this. I have to do this. Like, who am I to think I can just like, you know, happens when I get too comfortable. I like forget and I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'm totally good.
Yes. Nope. Right. I always say I got a little too cocky. I got a little too confident in myself. Like, oh, I'm good. I'm in the flow. And that can go, it's like, that can go wrong in a hurry. Things are great until they aren't. And then, you know, so, this is so fun, Natasha. So how did giving yourself permission to be courageous lead you to where you are and what you're doing right now?
Oh man. I feel like, I don't know that there was a specific point where I've said, okay, like I'm giving you courage. I feel like there's this passion within me that just has to do things and has to make them work and has to like, but I think there's so much to be said about, you know, going back to the part where I was like, I'm this over planner, over preparer, like, you know, there's something to be said of like, okay, that can be really good for laying the foundation, but then you have to let go. You have to just let yourself be. And I think that's so much easier said than done. And I always like to go back to thinking about dance class, because I don't know if you've seen any of like the dance videos online from classes where you learn a dance basically in 45 minutes to an hour, and then they shoot it like a music video at the end. And that's very intimidating. And although logically I can say, okay, well, you know, I'm a dancer for fun, I'm a singer first, I'm, you know, this, and I'm not this. And like, it's just a camera, or I've done this before, as many times and as many things as I can say to myself, it doesn't always talk me down off that ledge of being afraid of like messing up or not looking the way I want to look, or forgetting the choreography, or not being in the moment at every second. And, you know, it's like my own, no one else usually is really judging me as extremely as I think they are. It's all just coming from myself and wanting to be the best me I can be. And I'll say that there's been different points where different things have helped me. Like the EFT tapping has really helped, but that's only been something I've been working with for like 6 or so years now. Same thing, like losing my mom helped me to almost feel like I have her as this energetic backbone, like this superhero guardian angel being like, you can do this, because she always just believed in me so much. So I feel like that's just one positive I was able to take from losing her, is that I feel like this almost fortification, if you will. But again, just honestly, the self check-ins are what give me the courage. And then like, you know, I like to think of, I heard you speaking about this on an episode of your podcast, I think with your mom, where we say, you know, feel the fear and do it anyway. And so I like that phrase a lot, but to a certain extent, because I'm like, okay, there's a certain amount that we have to push ourselves past our comfort zones because it's our ego telling us a lie. And then there's the part where I'm like, I'll question that phrase, because I'm like, well, what part of my ego is like protecting me right now and keeping me safe, right? Because that's all it wants. Or like what part of me is actually unsafe, and it's my intuition saying, if you do this, you'll actually be more unsafe. So I think that's the point where you have to use a certain level of discernment. At least for me, that's what I have to do, because I have to decide, if this goes terribly wrong, what's my emotional state right now? Can I handle it if it goes wrong? And if I think I can, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to push myself. I'm going to take a chance, because I also know that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting anything to change. So it's like this balance and this dance, which makes sense in this situation, that you have to do with yourself. And kind of just, for me, I take little steps forward. Okay, a couple steps back, little steps forward. It's not these big, huge, courageous jumps sometimes, but usually not. It's usually a lot of baby steps.
Well, and so two things that you said that resonate deeply with me. The first is, which we don't give enough airtime to this, of feeling the fear and doing it anyway, but can I emotionally, like, what's my emotional state? And I think, like, as someone who myself has mental health struggles, I do have to take that into consideration. And there are situations where because courage can be speaking up, but it can also be staying quiet. And so for me, sometimes what I have to do is I have to quickly decide in a moment, can I energetically deal with this? Do I have the capacity to deal with this in my spirit, right? And there are times where I will fall back from saying something or doing something because I know I'm not in any physical danger, but I know I'm in emotional and mental danger. So I have to decide what I have the energy and the capacity to deal with in my head and in my spirit. So that's the one thing. And then the other thing that you said, oh, shoot, you said it and I completely forgot.
Okay.
I should have written it down. If you're on video, like sometimes I'm writing notes down, but oh my gosh.
It'll come back to you. That happens to me a lot.
Will.
But I love that you said that. I got full body chills the whole time you were speaking, because courage is not always loud and proud.
Yeah.
And
now I remember. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay, perfect. No, you're good.
People think that courage is this big, gargantuan step that they take, or this big thing that they do. But courage is often in the little moments. Just as you said, it's a collection of little steps. And I think that really is what it is. Courage is truly in the small moments. Courage shows up in the decisions that we make, that I really think are connected to what we were just talking about of, can I emotionally handle this?
Yeah.
So sorry to interrupt, but it was really important that you shared that the reminder that courage often shows up in the little ways. And let me know if this resonates with you. Many people that I've spoken to on the show say that in the moment when they were making a decision to do or to not do something, it didn't feel courageous. But now that they can look back in hindsight, they realize, oh yeah, that was courageous. But in the moment, I was like, I have to do this. Like, I don't have a choice, right?
Yeah.
And does that resonate with you? Do you feel that?
Absolutely feel that. I also feel, though, like when I'm thinking about dance class, it would feel like back in the day, like life or death. If I go on this dance floor, my whole body would react. So I'd be shaking, my heart would be palpitating, like my hands would be sweaty, and I couldn't figure out, like, why is this happening? And I knew there's so many deeper rooted issues as to like why I'm feeling so much trauma. And I don't even have to go out and shoot a video, right. But I knew that I wanted to.
Yeah.
And so me also being like, okay, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And now, I ended up moving into an emotional space eventually after, dealing with all of that progressively, where I was like, okay, if I mess up and if I'm not the way I want to be, you know what? I can't be this ultimate version of myself right now. I'm not that. I think I am in my head. I want to be that in my head, but I'm not. Yeah. So as sad as that makes me, I'm going to, say, okay, thank you for that thought. Now I'm going to go be where I actually am. And I'm going to be okay with that. And you know what? Doing that then just stripped away like another layer of this fear for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but like you said, it is those little moments where it's like that wouldn't have come to me at the beginning of the fear cycle that started it.
Yeah.
So it was a series of little moments where it's like, okay, finally this feels accessible to me.
Ooh, that's so rich, Natasha. So speaking of fears, and we started talking about this a little bit, but can you name what fears pop up for you now?
Oh, yes. Do we have 5 hours?
This can be a multi-part fear number one.
I wish I was kidding, but I'm kind of not. So there's definitely ones that pop up that are like newer or, you know, less intense. And then there's the ones that kind of pop up, you know, a little more regularly. I think the ones that I'm kind of working on now a lot are like, you know, fear of being misunderstood, especially coming from, you know, the entertainment background. Even if people are not looking at me this way, I feel like I'm judging myself, thinking like, oh, am I coming across the way that I really want to? Like, does the whole glam and dancing and singing thing like really match with like the raw, vulnerable, holistic stuff? And like, it's Natasha and it's where I am and it's who I am right now, but how can I mix those worlds? So I have those fears pop up. I have this fear of like not being able to genuinely or authentically express myself. A lot of it comes back to social media, which sounds honestly to me so lame when I say it out loud, but it's because, you know, so much of our businesses and just our soul expression and our connection to the outward world comes from social media these days. And so I do worry about that a lot. Fears of, you know, expressing myself quote unquote correctly, or being able to form the thoughts, or even coming onto a podcast like this, where I feel like this conversation has been so yummy, but, you know, there's times where I can't even form words and I stutter and I stumble and I'm not connected. And so those are all fears that constantly come up for me. And I have to, again, just go back to like what we always talk about and what you practice and teach so much, which is those check-ins.
Yeah. So the social media thing, I mean, it comes up often, not always on camera. There are many guests that we talk about this heartily before the camera even rolls. Because it is because so many people that I come in contact with, you know, we do have these personas, and not, you know, at various levels, right? Like we're at different levels, but everyone feels it. Everyone feels this, like, if I say this, is this going to, you know, is this going to be the thing that, you know, quote unquote cancels me? What if people, you know, don't want to work with me because of this, or what have you? So it comes up quite a bit. But then also, like for me, and I've talked about this a lot, and I will say secretly, I even lost sleep over this last night, because, you know, just thinking about this, you know, for smaller creators like myself, right? Like there's this, you know, social media, Instagram in particular, has all these hoops that they want you to jump through in order to get, you know, even if you are truly providing value, there's still so much more effort that you have to do. And so for me, it's this constant battle of putting myself out there and then actually like doing the work, doing the income generating work. Because I mean, for me, social media is not like a big income generator. Yes, there are people that come, you know, after the fact, you know, people who've seen me for a while, but it's not instantaneous.
Yeah.
And so this constant battle of, you know, do I keep putting myself out there, you know, to stay relevant, or do I fall back and do what I need to do to keep the lights on? And so, so I really was having kind of like this crisis of conscience at like 2:00 in the morning, thinking about like, what do I do? And I was praying a lot, like, God, like, what do you want me to do with this? What do you want me to do about this? Right. So, so anyway, that is very real for me as well. And I don't, you know, I don't have a lot of issues with speaking up, but again, I have to do this decision of, energetically and emotionally, can I deal with this? Because do I want to be online all day, like dealing with these people? Or do I just want to go on with my day and like, find joy, right? Like there's
like, yes, I know exactly. Oh my gosh. I'm glad that you said that, because it makes me feel not as alone. I don't like that you're experiencing it too, but thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and again, I really appreciate that you shared that the way that you come back to dealing with these things is just really being in tune with yourself. And sometimes I feel like such a broken record, promoting, oh, I'm talking about checking in once
I
again,
know,
but it
yeah.
really is the thing, because wherever you go, there you are. And if you're not paying attention to what's brewing inside, you can change environments, you can change jobs, you can change career paths. But if you aren't dealing with that underlying issue, as you said at the beginning, like you like to dig out, right? Like you want to dig up all the dirt and expose what's there. If you're not exposing what's there, and oh, by the way, it takes a lot of courage to do that, because what you find out may terrify you, right? It may change what you do in your life and the relationships that you have. And that in and of itself is courageous to do that exploration. But if you don't do that to some degree, you're going to keep having the same experience. So, I'm so thankful to you for sharing that. That's how you deal with those issues.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share.
Yes. So Natasha, you said this a couple times, so I want to ask you now, who is Natasha Slayton now?
No. Wow. Oh, I don't even know how to answer that question. I don't even know how to answer that question. Wow, you've stumped me. Because I can think of all of the titles in the world, or all of the things that might describe me on, the certifications or the this or the that or the labels. Yeah. But I really just feel like I'm this spirit embodied in human form, trying to like live out and learn lessons and be grounded and in peace. And that might sound so cliche, but that's been like something, there's been a lot of unlearning for me lately.
Ooh, yeah.
So I feel like Natasha, even though I feel like this fierce, like lioness, Leo, dramatic, all of these things, I've just been trying to sort of figure out myself on an energetic level and live more from that. And you said something to the effect earlier of like how with the entertainment industry, we're a lot more concerned about the exteriors and also how are things going to look? How are they going to sound? And I think we worry about that in any field, of course, because we want to, portray our souls. But just like living and being has been my goal lately. And I don't really know that I can put into words who is Natasha now.
Yeah. But I think what you shared is really important. And this is timely because I heard a survey result the other day that Americans only feel relaxed or in peace, right? 38 minutes a day.
I believe that.
And so I think you using that to describe who you are or this place that you're trying to get to, which is a journey, right? Because like we were talking about, there are some days where you're not going to be in peace no matter what, right? Because of circumstances that are happening. But being on this journey to find peace, to find that middle ground, to find that zero limit of I'm just making it through the day, right? I'm doing the best that I can. And I think you sharing that as who you are and just trying to, connect with yourself on an energetic, spiritual level, because I think we forget how all of us are part of this bigger fabric. And I hate for this to sound like so Pollyanna and like, airy fairy, right? But I think the more that we can realize that we are one piece in this bigger puzzle, that keeps us from making ourselves so precious, right? And by that, I mean like feeling like the little thing that you're dealing with is the absolute worst possible thing that could be going on at this time. And again, doing that check-in to say, is in the grand scheme of things, is this really that big of a deal? Like, am I in danger? If not, how can I make this a little easier for myself?
Yeah.
What can I do to make myself 5% better or 5% more peaceful, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this whole sea change, because I think that's where we set ourselves up for failure, is when we try to change so much at once. So you saying that you are just really on this intentional journey to find and be at peace is crucial and really, really important.
Thank you. I love that you said like the 5%. I remember you mentioned that on the episode of our podcast that you did, and that just hit home so much, because it goes back to that whole idea where it's like, okay, we're just going to take these little steps, because that ends up being the little parts of the bigger picture. It's like each stair on the staircase leads to the whole thing and getting to the top. But yeah, and it's not like I don't know who Natasha is, or I don't feel grounded in my spirit and in my heart, but I really don't feel like there are words to, you know, and yeah, and the peace journey is definitely, I don't even know that I have 38 minutes a day, but we're working up to it. Okay. No, I'm kind of joking, but you know, different days, different things. And it's all just a process and a part of life, I feel like.
It is. And I think that is really the takeaway, that there is not a final destination. The only time when we're done with evolving is when we leave this world.
Yeah.
I think that's the only time that the work is done. Until then, there's a reason why we're all still here, right? There's work that has been bestowed upon us and us alone, right? Like your vision and your purpose and what you're trying to accomplish is different than mine, and the way that we're going about it is different. But each of us has a unique reason for being here. So I really appreciate, and I don't think, not being able to put your whole self into words doesn't diminish at all what you're doing. And I think when you are finding more peace with yourself, you are able to show up fully. Yeah.
Beautifully said.
Yes.
Thank you.
So Natasha, there is someone who is listening to our conversation that has a goal or a dream or a vision on their heart, and they're not taking little steps. They're not doing anything because the fear is too important. The fear is more important than the goal. What is your guidance for that person to move forward?
So something that's really helped me is maybe we have like a list of goals or things we want to achieve or ways we want to feel. And those goals can sometimes seem insurmountable and impossible, or just very out of reach. And maybe we know all of the steps in between that we're going to have to do. And we know we're going to find more, because everything you do is so much harder than we think it's going to be. Sometimes not harder. I shouldn't say that. Most things are easier, but they're more involved than we think they're going to be. I should say it that way. So in that, there was once this person a couple of years ago that gave me this advice of like, do 3 things a day that you've been avoiding. And they can be the tiniest things, like the tiniest things. I really like lists. That's the way my brain works. And that way I at least don't forget anything. But when those lists pile up, I'm just like, I don't want to do a single thing on this list, not one. But if I can just tackle like 3 of those things, and if I can then also take those goals and write out like the 5 or 10 or even 20 or 100 steps that are involved in reaching those goals, and I take 3 steps a day, and then by the time 2 weeks comes around, I've either achieved the goal or like it's well on its way. So I did this with the podcast, because I had the podcast in my mind for like 3 years and was like, okay, but how am I going to find a production team? But how am I going to learn how to do this myself? But then I got to do the website and come up with a name and get all the healers on board and like come up with all the episodes. Oh my gosh. And that's like 1% of 1,000 things I had to do. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna wait for inspiration, and then write out all the things that I think I'm gonna have to do. I'm sure there's gonna be more. And then I'm just gonna start with one of them. Yes. Even the other night, I'm actually editing our podcast, our episode. And there's so many things to do now that our like second round of shows is coming back up. And I've been very overwhelmed with school and all the things. And so I was like, I'm just gonna download the files. I'm not even gonna open them. I'm not even going to edit them. I'm just going to download them. And once I did that, like that was so freeing for me that I ended up doing so many more things that were on my list. So I feel like that has been a really helpful approach to me, for me. And then also just, again, energetically aligning, whether it's like EFT or getting into nature or meditating or watching a funny movie, hugging your dog, whatever it is that's going to get you into a lifted vibration where you can feel inspired to take action. Because, if we just go from like the ego mind or the planning mind or the over-prepared mind, then we might be like getting all these tasks done, but they're not going to be as efficient as they would be if we were in flow. And also we're not going to be led to all of the other things that would be open to us if we're in that flow space. So I mean, that sounds esoteric, but I feel like those are the tips that really, really help me so much. It is work. It's constant work. But when you show up for yourself, things start to snowball. Yes. For the better.
Yes, I agree with that. And we said this a short while ago, but don't underestimate the power of taking a little step. Just like you said, if I can just download the files, because that's one less thing you think about. And I'm sure, because I've been that person, I'll tell you the story in a second. But when you have this list of things that you're thinking about over and over again, oh my God, I got to do that. I got to do that. Then I have to do this. And if you can do that one thing, then that's one less thing that your brain is going to be tired about. And the story that I have is, so yesterday I'm working on a training that I'm doing, and I need to like make some updates, some upgrades to the slide deck, but I need to change the branding on it because of who I'm working with. And I was so in my head about it, like, oh my, I gotta do this. I got to like make the cosmetic updates. But I wasn't able to get to the content. I said, but you know what? I'm going to have to do these cosmetic updates anyway. I'm going to have to make these edits. Just get the formatting done. And even though I didn't fully scrub the content, the fact that I got the edits done, I was like, okay, now the next part is going to be super easy because I don't have to deal with that.
Yes.
So don't underestimate the power of that one little step, because that gets you one step closer than you were before the step was completed. So I fully agree with you on that.
Oof, I love that so much. I love that so much. Yes. Amen.
Yes. And side note, when you were talking about tapping, I was, because you feel really good about this. And you said, oh, I'm relatively new. I've been doing it for 6 years. I tried tapping probably like 3 years ago. And I was like, this isn't working. I'm not going to do this. So, I mean, literally, I tried it twice. And I was like, no, this isn't for me. I'm not going to do this. And I used to feel that way about breath work. The first time I tried it, my coach was like, you're blocked. Like, you're not feeling this. Right. But then I came back to it a few years later and it was transformational. So maybe, Natasha, maybe you have inspired me to try tapping again.
I mean, I know it's like, you really have to figure out what's going to work for you. So that's why I like to share suggestions of what's worked for me. And I think that's hilarious because when I first heard of tapping, I was like, no. And I was like very big on gratitude journaling at the time, which I still love, but I was like, I'm not going to focus on what's bothering me and like tap on my body. Like, I just don't think it's going to do as much. And so I didn't give it the chance until someone, said, nope. Listen. And then, so I feel you. Because
my big thing is, oh my God, I'm not doing it right. And that's one of my fears is I'm not doing something the right way. And not like, there are a lot of things that I do that I don't like to ask permission for, but for me, like something that I want to be the best at, that's where I'm like, oh my God, I'm not doing this the right way. And so that is where I get in my head and it blocks my blessings.
You can tap on that. You could tap for not doing things the right way, afraid of not doing it the right way. And it just clears.
Yeah.
It resets the stage.
Oh, okay, Natasha. I will try it. I will try it.
Yay.
Natasha, this has been so much fun. I'm so thankful to you for joining the show and being in conversation with me today.
I am so thankful. Literally, thank you so much. I'm such an honor for you to ask me to be on this show. I honestly couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. So I appreciate you so much. I love everything you're doing. It's so helpful. Please do not stop. Not that you would, but please don't. I need you. And yeah, I just thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Natasha, where can people learn about you and get in contact with you?
Oh, yes. So my Instagram is at Natasha Slayton. And then my Ayurvedic wellness page is at Sacred Heart of Healing. And you can email me at Sacred Heart of Healing. I also have a contact email button on my personal page. So yeah, please feel free to reach out. Let's connect. And I look forward to hearing from all of you.
Wonderful. And I will include all of Natasha's information in the show notes so that you can learn more about her. Again, Natasha, thank you so much.
Thank you. Love you, Kia.
Love you. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of Courage Permission Slip. If you have found us on YouTube, please make sure that you like this episode and subscribe so that you can be alerted when new episodes are available. And if you are listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, please be sure to rate and review so that it makes it easier for other people to find and enjoy this content as well. That's it for today's episode of Courage Permission Slip. Hope you enjoyed it. And in the meantime, make your dreams bigger and more important than your fears. Until the next episode, bye.